Summary. I am a Tully and a Stark, she wanted to say. The river is in me. The north runs in my veins. I will freeze before I drown, and I will live before the water swallows me, and you cannot stop me. Chapter 2. Lannister. Jon sighed. Is this really necessary, Sansa? Sansa shot him a quelling look over her shoulder. Yes, she said. If you find it so painful, you can leave, Jon. I've Lady to keep me safe. And the Godswood isn't terribly dangerous either. That's not what I meant. All I'm doing is dyeing my hair. Sansa rolled her eyes. Nothing painful, nothing terrifyingly difficult. I still don't get why. People will remember this color, she said impatiently, which Jon thought was justified. He had been whining, and she might very well have explained this before, while he didn't pay attention. And the Lannisters mustn't find anything about me to remember. It isn't so bad. What does Robb think? Jon asked. The cold anger on Sansa's face when she heard that almost made him flinch. Robb isn't my keeper, she told him, icily formal. And I'll thank you not to act like I'm simply a puppet. Now stay if you can be quiet, or go back to Winterfell. Jon sighed again and slumped against the weirwood trunk, feeling the rough bark scrape against his back. I like your hair as it is, he told her. That's the point. Sansa rolled her eyes, plucking the skinful of walnut shell filtrate from its position beside her. I cannot be beautiful when they come, and I cannot dye my hair the night before if anyone is to believe me, so I will do it now. After a moment, her eyes softened. I don't mean it other than that, Jon. This isn't anywhere near as painful as things we'll have to do soon. You won't be doing anything painful. Jon sat up straight, back stiff and angry. Not a single thing, Sansa. This isn't your dream world. I'm here, and you will be safe beside me. Do you hear me? She didn't look so dubious as she had years ago, but Sansa's eyes did narrow slightly, irritably. Again, not the point. And what is the bloody point? That I'm doing this and you can't stop me. So either be quiet, Jon, or go back to Winterfell. I'm sure Arya will want to spar with you, if you've the time. It was Jon's turn to roll his eyes. Over the years, Arya's resentment of Sansa's claim on Jon's time had grown, and she had grown more and more impatient with Jon so much as looking at Sansa. Thankfully enough, Sansa hadn't done much more than laugh when she heard. Though she refrained from teasing Arya about jealousy, she hadn't offered any of that courtesy to Jon. Robb, as usual, found the whole thing hilarious. The afternoon sun warmed Jon's chest as he napped. Sansa woke him when she was finished, and they headed back to Winterfell. When she saw his suspicious looks at her hair, which was still bright red, if only a little darker than before, Sansa sighed. It'll take time to darken. Jon looked at her and then reached out and tugged a curl that had escaped her single braid. I can wait, he told her, and new affection suffused his voice. You'll have to, Sansa replied tartly, but her face softened. We've time, he said instead of the 1,000 other things crowding his tongue. Don't silence yourself before you must, Sansa. I couldn't bear it if you dashed. Jon paused, feeling heat rush to his face along with the old urge to protect. She sighed then, looking simultaneously impatient and fond. I don't want to, she said. I like my hair, and I like to talk, and I don't want to let it go. But there are things that, if we don't do, can kill us. And seeing any of you die will kill me, so I will do what has to be done. I will cut my hair off if necessary. I will learn how to kill a man. I will do 100 other things I don't want to do because the alternative is a nightmare. Her words had started calm enough, but by the end, she was flushed and, while not shouting, her words were emphatic and as bee-stinged sharp as with Arya all those years back before he knew what she knew and admired her for it. Under the too bright afternoon haze, Jon thought he could see the woman she would become, all fierce and kind and beautiful, determinedly, heartbreakingly strong. And, he said, willing her to look at him, willing her to see the promise in his eyes, the truth. I swear to you that I will be there beside you. The king's retinue came in a long winding line, just as Sansa remembered. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a strange mixture of fear and anger. Her hands were unclenched though, and when King Robert Baratheon stepped forward, reeking of wine and horse sweat, Sansa did not let a single one of her muscles tighten, did not allow a single ounce of her rage and grief and defiance to show. "Your Majesty," she said, dipping into a low curtsy. When she rose, the king smiled at her, said, "You're a pretty one," and moved on. A moment later, Cersei Lannister stepped out of a carriage, and what had seemed manageable with the king appeared an insurmountable task against her. The queen, the woman who watched as Ned Stark died, the woman who made Sansa's life a living hell. Sansa curtsied once more, but couldn't find words to speak. Her eyes were trained on the ground, and she saw the queen's skirts come closer. Her fingers tightened on her skirts almost involuntarily, but Sansa held her position, and Cersei moved on without pause. She unfolded out of her curtsy just in time to see Joffrey step forward. The world went white for a moment, for a heartbeat. It reassembled almost instantly, and she managed to pull up a tremulous smile for him when Joffrey smiled at her with a sorry twitch of his wormy lips. She felt a sudden, abrupt movement from Robb. Instinctively, she wrapped her hand around his upper arm. Just in time, too. Had she been a half second later, Robb might have actually leapt at him, and that would have been well, disaster wasn't the right word, something far worse than a disaster. "Robb," she bit out. His muscles flexed under her hand, but she didn't let go, she only tightened her grip until he hissed in pain. They had moments before they'd be noticed, moments before everyone started wondering what was wrong with the air. "Calm down, please just calm down." It wasn't Sansa who stopped him in the end. Jon shifted, just enough for both of them to be aware of the rasp of his scabbard against his leg, and that seemed to jolt Robb back to reality. The idea that, if he attacked the Crown Prince of Westeros, Jon would follow without hesitation, though it be death for them both. The rest of the greetings passed quickly enough, though it was through a milky haze of both rage and hurt. Sansa felt alternately numb and raw, her cheeks flushed against her furs and her fingers twitching for the uncomfortable weight of a sword. They dispersed once the last of the people had passed through with strict instructions to be ready for the feast during supper. Sansa waited just long enough for the majority of people to leave, just long enough to find a modicum of privacy for the three of them, before unleashing her wrath. Robb had fucked up. He knew this. Jon knew this too, but he was too aware of his bastardy to upbraid Robb as he deserved. Sansa, who had a tongue sharper than any sword when needed and no reason to temper it, was the one who actually snapped at him, in the eaves between the stables, face just a few shades lighter than her hair. "What was that?" "A mistake," Robb replied, bowing his head. "I'm sorry, Sansa." "No," she snapped. No. You don't get to make mistakes like that, Robb. Gods damn you." If Jon hadn't been there, what do you think might have happened? You're even luckier that Grey Wind wasn't there, because he would have taken Joffrey's throat. Damn all the consequences. We have to be more patient than they. We have to do better than them. We have to survive. And you cannot kill all of us because you fall into some protective rage. Why don't we all just... Jon actually stumbled back a half step when Sansa turned on him, eyes flashing. "And you," she said cuttingly. "What did you think you were doing? What did you think that if Robb actually went into battle, you'd follow him? That if he died, you'd die too?" Both of them had seen Sansa angry, sometimes painfully so, but never to this extent. This isn't anger, Robb thought, piecing the truth together slowly. This is betrayal. "That's not what I..." "No, because you didn't think. Neither of you used a single part of your brain, and the only reason nothing happened was luck." She drew herself up, eyes cold and empty as Rob had seen only once before, when she first ran into his rooms in the night, weeping and choking on 6 deaths she couldn't forget. It hurt his heart to see. "I have to go. John, keep Arya away from me tonight. I cannot handle her. Not now. Rob, keep Bran beside you and don't let him leave your sight." Her eyes swept over them both, again, and then she left just as quickly, just as quietly as she dragged them there. "She's angry," Rob said. John didn't answer, but his expression spoke volumes. "You think that's obvious?" "A bit, yeah," John retorted. "I mean, I couldn't tell from her shouting at both of us, or looking as red as her hair, or from the fact that she's basically ensured we don't spend any time with her for the entire feast. But yes, tell me your insights, Rob, please." Rob exhaled sharply and rested his weight against the wooden eave. "Don't get short. It doesn't suit you." Rob. "We'll do what she says because we messed up," Rob interrupted. "And we'll apologize until we're blue in the face. But you need to know why she's so angry, and it's because she thinks I chose you over her," John finished, looking suddenly weary. "Because she's terrified of being alone," he corrected. "Though that's a part of it, too." After a pause, John levered himself to his feet, mouth pursed in distaste. "Gods, this is tiring. How much longer do we have to do this?" Rob gave a short, humorless laugh. "The rest of our lives, according to Sansa. Personally, I'm hoping to calm things down in 10 years. If the gods smile down on us 10 different ways and we get lucky 100 other," John replied wryly. "And even then it's a maybe." "We're too young for this," said Rob. "Maybe," John murmured, "but we're the only ones for this too." "God save us." John nodded, looking lost in his own thoughts, and left. Rob followed him out after some time. Rob had messed up, and now he'd pay the price for it gladly, to Sansa, to John, to anyone they deemed necessary. They were family, they worked together, and no Dan Lannister would ever be able to come between them. In the cool wind of the courtyard, more horses and men ran about than any in recent history. Rob breathed in, breathed out, lifted his chin high, and let the full weight of being air fall on his shoulders once more. "I've a son," said Robert, "and you've a daughter, Ned, a beautiful one, at that. Pity her hair so north dark. It'd have been better if she had Catelyn's hair, but any man will want her once she's flowered." "Robert," Ned said, and meant it as a protest. The friend he'd once had might not have balked at saying such things about girls, but young Robert would never have dreamt of speaking of Ned's daughter in such blunt terms. But this Robert Baratheon was king for over a decade, and fat with indulgence and whores, Ned's protests would go unheard if he wasn't just as blunt as Robert. "I mean it," Robert said. "Think on it. Joffrey's young yet, and you can stay in King's Landing while they're married. It's a good idea, Ned, joining our 2 houses." Ned sighed. "I'll talk to her, Robert. I'll need some time, though. You can't just tell me this the night before." "You want to keep her in Winterfell," Robert boomed. "This castle will freeze her to her bones. Gods, Ned, I'm still shivering. I knew there was a reason I didn't come north." There would have been a time earlier in the day when Ned might have taken offense. Now he was moving past that and straight into a tired irritation that seemed to be the only response he could have for his oldest friend. "We'll see," he offered, and that was that. When her father asked her if she wished to marry Joffrey, Sansa didn't hesitate to say that, whoever he wished to betroth her to, she refused to marry until she turned 18. "Mother was that age when she married you," she told him firmly. "I wish to be no younger when I do the same." "Very well," he said, and though Sansa could see that he was surprised, he did accept it. For the rest of her life, they never spoke of it. Sansa avoided Jon and Robb for a week by keeping her head down and disappearing into the shadowed corridors that were yet to be furnished. Her head ached when she remembered that all-encompassing rage, but her heart ached even worse. All she wanted was to move on, but not at the cost of making the same mistake again. If Robb decided that he hated Joffrey and was going to kill him, he would die. If he sank into the same old rage, Sansa would be forced to watch him die under a Kingsguard's sword, and then Sansa would die just as surely as Robb would. So she kept her distance. She wasn't ready to confront them, either of them. Neither was she ready to confront her emotions. If she allowed herself to indulge in the fears swirling beneath her breastbone, she would drown, and she was only just treading water. "I am a Tully and a Stark," she wanted to say. "The river is in me. The north runs in my veins. I will freeze before I drown, and I will live before the water swallows me, and you cannot stop me." It was a week later that Robb finally caught her in the Godswood. His eyes looked older than ever before. There was repentance along the slump of his shoulders and an apology written across the clench of his hands. Sansa closed her eyes, thought, "We do not turn our heads," and stepped forward to tell him why she was angry. Sansa stepped forward and raised her chin and decided, as steady as a storm-ridden weirwood tree, to forgive him. Bran did not fall this time. Sansa had told Robb what happened. Jaime Lannister lay with his sister in the tower, and Bran climbed it and saw them, and then the Kingslayer pushed Bran out of the window. Bran was crippled ever after. Sansa didn't know anything beyond that, because she left before Bran awoke, only that there was an assassin who spouted Lannister names and a bitter, cold thing in her brother's heart for being a cripple ever after. Robb kept Bran beside him. Sansa had never seen either of them so exasperated with each other. Usually Robb lived and let live. He didn't interfere so much in small, regular affairs. That he was being so strict with Bran was something difficult for him to do, as well as for Bran to accept. Sansa laughed when she saw their faces. Despite being so different in coloring, both Robb and Bran managed to wear identical expressions of grumpiness. "You're finding this hilarious," Robb accused as he escorted her back to her chambers from yet another feast. Bran was asleep, as was Rickon. There was no one in the hallways, and both took advantage of the privacy. "Of course," Sansa replied. "I've to take my amusement from somewhere, right? We'll have little enough to laugh about soon." "Must you bring that up?" he asked sharply, all levity gone from his face. Sansa would have sighed if she wanted a fight. Robb was old beyond his years, and she sometimes felt she took advantage of that. Who else could have borne the news of his own impending death, of his family's impending demise with something approaching equanimity? Adults would have found it difficult, and Robb had been only 12. But she needed help, and Robb was the best one for it. It didn't surprise her that he didn't like to be reminded of her departure from Winterfell. Soon enough, he'd have little ability to comfort her, and even less to protect her. And if there was one thing Robb hated, it was feeling helpless. "It's the truth," she said, and then pressed a light hand to his jaw. "But no, 'twas a twist of my tongue. Let's not fight, Robb, not tonight." Sansa stepped back and grinned suddenly, wickedly. "I'd much rather talk about the Lannister handmaid you were talking to yesterday discovered a new love of lions." "It was just talking," Robb protested. Sansa arched an eyebrow, and he shoved her shoulder. She let herself move with the rough motion and laughed, when he caught her before her shoulder was bruised by the wall. "I'm sure it was, brother." "It was! Gods, you're even worse than Bran. At least he knows when to keep his mouth shut." Sansa ducked her head and laughed again, a warmth pooling in her chest as if she'd drunk sweetened wine. She would miss this when she left. She would feel each mile's distance like a punch to the gut. "If I miss this," she thought, hand wrapped around Robb's arm, head cushioned against his chest, knowing Jon to be there in another hour or so, sword sheathed and grimly watchful. "No, I will miss this, but it will not be a weakness. This love, O gods above, this love shall be my strength." They headed out on a cloudless day, and Jon felt like he might get sick from the pit in his belly. Sansa flashed smiles to Lady Catelyn and Bran and Rickon, bright and half wild, as if she wanted to slice the world apart with its edge. When she turned to Robb, though, her face softened, the look in her eyes was unspeakably fond, and she pressed a hand to his cheek before rising to her toes and whispering something in his ear. The night before, Robb had slipped into Jon's rooms. He'd stared at him, and then sank to his knees in front of Jon's bed. "Be safe," he'd ordered. "Promise me, Jon. I couldn't bear it if you died, if Sansa died. You are coming back, and you are coming back whole, and I will never forgive you if you don't. Swear it, on all the gods we know. Swear it." Jon had gripped Robb's shoulders, had dragged Robb closer, and then hung on with all the strength he had. "I promise on my honor," he whispered. "I swear to come back, on everything I love, everything I have and want. I promise, I swear it. To all the gods, all the demons, every damned Stark that came before us, and all that will come after. We'll come back, Robb." Cersei had never before met a girl so blatantly cowardly. Sansa Stark squeaked in the presence of every last member of the royal family. She went white no matter how gentle any of them were. The only time Cersei had bothered to speak to her, she looked like she might faint. Joffrey found her disinteresting. Robert had wanted to betroth the two, apparently, but Ned Stark had served some use in his life and decided to decline the offer. Cersei had watched their interactions carefully, and it seemed that the Stark girl was just as quiet and retiring when asked to speak to any Lannister, be it Myrcella, who was a gentle girl herself, or Tommen, who was the softest of them all. The other Stark girl was an idiot. Playing at swords with her brother might have been acceptable in the North backwards, however, that it was, but it would have to change in King's Landing. She spent far too much time with her bastard brother. "Let Sansa Stark try to marry into our family," Cersei thought. "We will eat her alive and send the bones back to Winterfell for her brothers to weep over." The lady did not die. Sansa made sure of it, with Jon tempering the worst of Arya's behavior, and ghosts there to soothe the harshest edges of Nymeria's temper. There was little occasion for Joffrey to go after them, and even less for Nymeria to attack him. And so Lady survived. The Starks brought direwolves to King's Landing, and Sansa took solace in Lady's heavy breathing warmth when she thought she might go mad from fear. One night, Sansa awoke from a nightmare, trembling like a newborn colt. She drew her robe over her nightrail and moved into her outer chambers, knocking on one of the doors to admit Jon, who stood guard outside. Curled in front of the fire, hours later, she confessed, "I cannot stop dreaming. Whenever I close my eyes, I see them kill father. Whenever I open them, I'm in a nightmare. I want to go home, to Winterfell. You know what we stand to lose? Oh, I should never have." "Sansa," Jon murmured, cutting her increasingly hysterical wonderings off. "Sansa, you've done the best you can, sweetling. You think if you'd just thrown a big enough tantrum, father would have stayed back? We couldn't stay home, none of us, but we're going to do the best we can now. And you'll see Winterfell again, I swear to you." Sansa dreamt that she walked the shadowed, moonlit corridor of the Red Keep. Her ears were sharper than ever before. What might have only looked like black shadows if she were to walk there herself had 1,000 different, glittering shades in it. She heard a voice, low and rasping. "Ned Stark came to King's Landing because Jon Arryn died. He's looking into the death of his mentor, and if you aren't careful, he'll find out what Arryn knew. Distract him, or find something to distract him with. We can little afford civil war right now. The lions will destroy the wolves, and then the dragons will come," replied another voice, strangely familiar. "We've nothing to worry over." "Nothing to worry over? Varys? If it worries you so, bring the Targaryens across the narrow sea sooner. You are responsible for them, not I." And Varys, bald pate gleaming in the dim light, left. Sansa awoke, panting. There had been something there in the curve of her vision, a flash of white hair, a flicker of pale bone claws. She had not been dreaming it. It had been too real for a dream. Too different. but she knew what that white hair belonged to. Sansa had brushed it, had washed it, had wept into it. Lady's fur was as familiar to her as her own hair. I wasn't with her. I was in her. Old Nan's tales flicked through her head, all coming down to one word: warg. Monster, they might have named her, the men of the North, if they'd known. Monster, death dealer, luckless daughter of the unholy union of South and North. The North remembers. We are the children of the first men. We are a part of the land, and the land is a part of us. How many have said that father has ice in his veins? How many of our ancestors named themselves wolves? Sansa's hands were trembling faintly. In another time, in another world, she had watched Lady die, and something had died within her as well, something that she had never recovered, even as the rest of her family crumbled away. There is a reason our house sigil is a dire wolf. Gods above, she swore under her breath, and then yanked herself out of bed, still shaking. This changed everything. Lady was her, and she was Lady. And, oh, gods, had Rickon screamed when Ramsay killed Shaggy Dog? He must have loved that black direwolf so much, spent so much time with him, how he must have wept when he was killed. Sansa sank to her knees in front of the fire, chilled to the bone, and she wept, for poor, dead Rickon that she'd buried with barely shaking hands, so used to the loss, for her parents, who never even got a burial, for Lady, who had died for no reason than innocence, but above all for herself, who watched all this happen and remained alive no matter how she wished she weren't. It had been so long since she remembered the old scars, so long since she last mourned. It had felt ridiculous to do so in Winterfell, where her family lived and loved and burned so brightly, but in King's Landing, in the place where she'd been prisoner for so long, it felt right and good. I'm sorry, she thought, and allowed the tears to fall as they might. I am so sorry. I was foolish, I was weak, I know, I watched you die, and I'll never forget it. I am sorry. Ned Stark is looking into the death of Jon Arryn. Make sure he finds nothing. The letter was not signed. Jaime held the parchment to the candle by his bed and knew only one person in King's Landing who curled her letters in that fashion. There was no hesitation when he strapped the sword to his side and followed Ned Stark out of the Red Keep. News came that morning of a battle between their father and Jaime Lannister. Jon heard little of it, only that Lord Stark had been visiting a section of the city that needed repair. Jaime Lannister attacked him with a number of his guards. Jory Castle and his men were dead. Nobody seemed ready to say how. But then came the news that his father had been injured, and Jon raced through the castle to find him. When he arrived at his bedside, he saw a pale Arya sitting beside him, clutching onto his hand tightly. Arya, he said, stepping forward. She turned to meet his gaze. Jon, she greeted, and sounded so empty, so young, Jon nearly cried. You heard? Did the maesters see to him? Yes, she whispered. They say he'll live. Arya's hands tightened into fists, knuckles stark white against her skin. But nobody's saying why he's here. Jory's dead. It was Lannister guards who brought father back, and nobody's saying a single damn word why he's like this. I don't. Jon felt his fingers flex helplessly against the hilt of his sword. Where's Sansa? She saw father here and ran away, Arya spat. I can't stand to see her. How does someone like her belong to the North? Father's here. Father's hurt. What does she have to do that's so important? Don't talk about her like that, Jon said quietly. She might not have your bravery, Arya, or your strength. But she's nice? Arya asked mockingly. She's pretty? She spat the word as if it were a curse. I don't care. I don't care. At least I don't walk away from my father when he might never walk again. Jon sighed and turned away. There was no use talking to Arya when she got in these moods. Instead, he left the sick room and walked to Sansa's rooms down the hall. When he opened the door, he heard the quiet, stifled sound of sobs. Chills prickled down his spine. He rushed forwards and found Sansa in her bedchamber, curled on the far side against the floor, shaking enough for his belly to swoop uneasily. She didn't even look up to see him. "Sansa?" he asked slowly, unease tightening his chest. She looked up. Her blue eyes were filled with tears, and there was such aching heartbreak written across the planes of her face that Jon found himself wrapping his arms around her, tight and close, so that he no longer had to see it. "I did this," she said, voice small and thin. Jon felt himself stiffen reflexively before forcing himself to relax a little. "I did this, Jon. Did you swing the sword?" he asked. Sansa didn't answer, and he went on, "Did you tell the Lannisters to go after father?" "I should have told them not to." Sansa's voice broke, and Jon felt like his heart might fracture with it. "I know what he's looking for. I could have saved Jory. I could have saved Jory. I could have saved the guards. This is my fault. Their blood is on my hands." Jon tightened his hands until he thought he might be able to sink inside Sansa, slip under her skin, and become one with her heart, her blood, her lungs. "Their blood," he whispered fiercely, "is on the hands of Jaime Lannister. You didn't kill him, you didn't hurt father. Chin up, Sansa. We are the wolves of the North, and we will survive." "Survive?" she asked, sounding on the verge of hysterics. "Survive?" "Jon, they killed Jory. Jory, who gave me sweets that time on the road. Do you even remember that? He was a good man, he was a kind man, and Jaime Lannister killed him because he got in the way. He did this last time too, you know? And I just didn't remember." Her voice dried up, and then she said softly, "I just didn't remember." Jon could do a lot. But this was a grief Sansa had to work through on her own. This was something he could not forgive, because it wasn't his to forgive. These were Sansa's demons, the things she had never known to fear, the things that were etched into the lining of her muscles and the insides of her bones. And so he held her, allowed her that small comfort. Sansa might fall apart, might crack open, but he would be there beside her to pick up the pieces. He'd be there wherever she wanted him. Sansa wept when her father woke. She wept, and she wept, and she laughed, too, relief curled under her breastbone. "I resigned from the position of hand," he told them, and she felt almost lightheaded with giddiness. They were going home to Winterfell, to freedom. But then the king came. And then they were staying, and then they were dying. My thoughts as a reader. The tale bends upon a darker wind, as if fate itself has grown restless. Sansa Stark, once a child of songs and pretty dreams, now carries a shadow heavier than her years. Lady's survival is no small mercy, but mercy in Westeros is never without its price. There is a cruel beauty here, Jon's quiet comfort, a wolf's fierce bond, the fragile threads of hope that might alter what was once written. And yet, blood still seeps into the cracks of the story. Guilt clings to Sansa like a second skin, whispering that her choices may save or doom those she loves. I cannot help but wonder, will her new knowledge turn the wheel, or only grind her family to dust beneath it?